All right, so we're learning about this computer here. This is a Lenovo computer made by IBM or Lenovo. It's called the ThinkCentre, and it's got a DVD reader, CD rewriter. It's got ports on the front and on the back, and we're going to open it up. It has a button on the right-hand side and a button on the left-hand side, and when both are pressed at the same time, we can lift up the case. All right, let's see what's inside here. So here's some little directions here. You can open it up. You should pull on the blue parts. There's some little directions. Watch out, do not put your finger in the fan. We've already unplugged this, and let's kind of take a look here. So we're going to pull this open. There we go. And let's see what's inside this computer. Wow, there's a lot of stuff in here. Okay, well, let's start with the most basic stuff. We could tell from the front that there is a DVD drive in here. And here's that DVD drive right here. It's pretty thin, actually. And there's a little cord that could be used, a pull, that could be used to pull off the connecting cable. I'm going to leave that on there, actually. And then there's the hard drive. Every computer has a hard drive. I'll pull this. I better pull this back first. And this hard drive, let me see if I can turn around here, was made by a company called Hitachi. It's a DeskStar. And the little tag here probably says how much storage this hard drive has. It was made in 2007, this hard drive. I'm guessing it will store about 30 gigabytes of information. I'm not seeing the storage number on there, but that's okay. Push that back in there. Okay. You'll notice on the back of both the hard drive and the CD drive that there are cables. This one right here, that is a power cable that's going into the hard drive. And this one is the data, the information that's going either into the hard drive or out of the hard drive or both. Okay. And if we follow those cables, okay, you can see that this red cable goes down and it goes into this slot right here. And that slot is right inside on this green board, and this green board is called the main board, sometimes called the motherboard, but we're going to call it the main board. This is the main board. This is really the computer itself, this board right here. All right, let's look at the CD drive again for just a second. Here's the CD drive. It also has cables. You can see the cables coming off. There's data cables, and there are these gray cables, and they go right down here. Okay. So the cables inside the computer are either carrying information, data, as electrical signals, or they're carrying, if they're these colored ones, they're carrying electricity. Okay, let's see what else we've got in here. Well, this thing right here, this big aluminum thing, is called a heat sink. It's like a radiator. It's made to cool down the inside of the computer. And underneath this heat sink, I would be not very surprised if it was the processor. The processor is kind of like the brain of the computer. So I just lifted up the little lever here on the heat sink, and I'm going to lift this up. And it's quite heavy. It feels like a block of copper, really. I'm going to set it aside, and underneath here, this is the actual processor for the computer. This is where all the math calculations that are used to make the computer work, to decide what to show on the screen, to move the mouse, I mean, all those things happen on the processor. It's also called the microprocessor. microprocessor could be taken out if I'm very careful here. Maybe blow on that a little bit. And if I can be very careful to lift this out, this is basically the brain of the computer. This is the microprocessor. You'll see all these little spots here. These are all connections, and all those connections end up being connected to some other part of the computer. Inside this processor, the circuitry is so small, you'd have to use a microscope to see the circuits. It's just tiny, the tiniest little things. And scientists are the ones that design these microprocessors. For the past 20, 30, 40 years, every single year, the processor has either gotten smaller or it's got more circuits on the inside. And with each new generation, the processors get either faster or they get smaller. Now this socket right here, this is where the processor goes in. Sometimes, if a computer has been around a while, if the computer just came out, the processor might be kind of slow, and people might be able to get a faster processor that fits right inside their computer. That's called upgrading the computer. So suppose this processor went at, I don't know, 5 gigahertz, and then it was another processor exactly the same size that was interchangeable that went 5 times faster. Then you could take this one out and put the new one in, but it'd have to fit exactly. It would have to have exactly the same pins underneath, the exact same shape and everything. One thing about putting processors in is they usually have a little slot, which helps to make sure that they are lined up nice and straight. Okay, and then we're going to close this little door, and we have to put down this little latch here. And that's going to push down the processor. And we got to snap that in. All right, there we go. Okay, now the heat sink is very important. Without the heat sink, the processor will be so hot after about actually less than 10 seconds. I put together a computer before and put in the processor, and I didn't have the heat sink on quite right. It wasn't touching the processor, and the processor went over 200 or 300 degrees within a few seconds, and then the computer shut down. So computers have to have some sort of way to get rid of the heat from the processor. So we're going to put this heat sink back on here. This is really just like a radiator on a car. Underneath there is some gunky stuff that's actually like a paste, and this paste is called a thermal or heat paste. It helps to keep the heat coming off the processor and into the heat sink. So we're going to put the heat sink right back on here. I had to go in a little slot on the one side, and then there's this little handle to push it down, and it's in place now. On the back side of this heat sink is a fan. That fan pulls air through the heat sink, so the heat sink gets hot, and then the fan blows the air out the back, and then there's another fan that blows the air out the back of that. For people that like really, really fast computers, there's something called overclocking, which is, if you know how to do it, you make the processor go faster than it is designed to go. And then the processor gets really hot, the heat sink can't keep up with it, but what the people who are overclocking their computer do is they put in a special system, maybe like a car's liquid cooling system, to cool down the processor, and they might be able to get the processor to go 50% faster or even twice as fast. And then the people that usually do that are like people that play video games a lot, and they really want the video games to go fast. So we can see back here there's some other stuff in here. There's another little heat sink here. Let's see if we can open that up. It looks like it's got a pretty good hook on there. So actually I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get that out of there. No, probably not. I would guess there's another processor of some sort underneath there. Maybe it is the video processor which makes the picture that you see on the screen. Okay, we can see lots of other circuits on here. One of the things we can see right here is an Intel processor of some sort, so there could be 3 processors actually in here. Perhaps that's one for the sound or something. Okay, so there could be multiple processors, but the main processor, that's going to be underneath the probably biggest heatsink in the thing. Now every computer has something called primary storage or primary memory, and that'll be the thing we start the next video with.